A shocking report has exposed Chelsea Clinton's ties to an alleged $82 million USAID scandal. As the story breaks wide open, Vice President JD Vance doesn't hold back, delivering a response that stunned the political world. This video dives into the explosive details, the Clinton family's connection to foreign aid money, and why JD Vance's words are shaking Washington to its core. Washington was already tense that morning. The halls of power buzzed with whispers, but no one was ready for what the Department of Governmental Ethics, DOGE, dropped into the news cycle. Their report was short, direct, and explosive. USAID gave the Clinton Global Initiative a staggering $82 million. The headline ripped across every TV screen: 82 million USAID fraud linked to Chelsea Clinton. The report even named the details. $3 million allegedly spent on Chelsea Clinton's lavish wedding. Another $11 million used to buy a mansion. Not a single dollar in income tax had been reported. The country froze. Viewers gasped. Many sat in silence. Others shook their heads in disbelief. Chelsea Clinton quickly called it a setup by Trump's administration. She insisted she never received such money, claiming she was being targeted because of her family name. But the evidence DOGE revealed painted a darker picture: receipts, transfers, signatures. It wasn't just politics anymore. It was personal. And inside the White House, Vice President JD Vance quietly prepared to step forward. He wasn't angry. He wasn't even loud. But he knew. The truth had to be told. Something big was about to happen on live TV. The scandal spread like wildfire. By afternoon, every major network had invited Chelsea Clinton for a response. Cameras caught her walking into a studio, dressed sharp, her face set in defiance. She sat down and wasted no time. "This is a lie," she said firmly. "I have never received a cent from USAID. This is a political hit job by Donald Trump and his people. They hate my family because we've spent decades helping the poor. This is their way of destroying us." The studio audience clapped weakly, but her voice shook for a second. The pressure was heavy. As she spoke, images of her grand wedding and her mansion flashed across the screen. The anchors leaned in, pressing her harder. But the receipts? What about the money trail? What about the missing tax records? Chelsea's answers grew shaky. "Those are fabricated. Everyone knows my parents have been attacked for years. This is no different." But people at home weren't convinced. Phones rang, social media burned with questions, and that was when the host announced, "We have a surprise guest joining this conversation, the Vice President of the United States, JD Vance." The crowd gasped. The cameras cut to a split screen. On one side sat Chelsea Clinton, pale but determined. On the other, Vice President JD Vance, calm and steady, his eyes clear with purpose. "Good evening, America," Vance began softly. His voice was not rushed, not angry, but piercing. He looked directly into the camera. "This is not about politics. This is about truth." Chelsea shifted in her seat, her hands clutched tightly together. Vance continued, "The DOGE report shows $82 million sent from USAID to the Clinton Global Initiative. We all saw where that money went. Millions spent on personal luxuries, not one dime declared for taxes. That's fraud, plain and simple." The studio went silent. Even the host froze. Chelsea tried to interrupt. "That's false." But Vance raised his hand gently. "Chelsea," he said firmly, "this is not just about money. It's about integrity. You are following the footsteps of your parents, Bill and Hillary Clinton. Footsteps of corruption, deceit, and betrayal of the American people. You must repent before it is too late." The room shook with gasps. The crowd could not believe what they had just heard. And then Vance paused, leaned in, and prepared to deliver a sentence that would burn across history. The room fell so still that even the cameras seemed to pause. JD Vance had spoken with the weight of a man unafraid of the truth, and everyone felt it. Chelsea Clinton sat frozen, her lips pressed tightly together. The host, who moments earlier had pressed Chelsea with questions, now shifted nervously in his chair. Viewers at home held their breath. Social media lit up instantly. Did he just call out the Clintons directly? Some supporters cheered, others were stunned. Even critics of Trump's administration admitted, no vice president in modern history had ever spoken so plainly on live television. Vance leaned forward, his tone sharper now. This isn't a witch hunt. This is proof. Every receipt, every dollar, every transfer is documented. $3 million on a wedding. $11 million on a mansion. That is not charity. That is theft from the American taxpayer. The audience erupted in whispers. A woman in the back row wiped tears from her eyes, shaking her head in disbelief. Chelsea's jaw tightened. She wanted to fight back, but the evidence was already out there. The vice president wasn't finished, not even close. JD Vance kept his gaze steady, never raising his voice. Chelsea, you say this is about helping the poor. Tell me, what poor community benefited from your $11 million mansion? Who was lifted from poverty by your extravagant wedding? The question hit like a hammer. The audience gasped. Chelsea's face flushed red. She stammered, That's not true. Those numbers are twisted. My foundation has built schools, funded programs. Vance shook his head calmly. Your foundation has been a cover. The Clinton Global Initiative has received millions from government grants for decades. Money that should have gone to struggling families, to job programs, to relief for veterans. But instead, it lined the pockets of the elite. Your family's name has become a symbol of greed, not generosity. The host tried to cut in, Mr. Vice President, but the crowd drowned him out with murmurs of agreement and disbelief. On Twitter, clips of Vance's words exploded. Hashtags like Martin Clinton exposed and Vance truth trended instantly. Chelsea's defenses were cracking. For the first time, her voice trembled. Why are you doing this? She whispered. Vance answered with steel in his voice, because America deserves honesty. JD Vance wasn't finished. He leaned back, his expression heavy with the weight of history. Chelsea, I want the American people to remember something. This isn't new. Your father, Bill Clinton, served 8 years as president. And what did America get? Broken promises, scandals, a legacy of weakness. The crowd murmured louder. Chelsea shook her head in frustration, but she didn't speak. And your mother, Vance continued, Hillary Clinton, has been at the center of corruption for decades. Her decisions have left our borders wide open, inviting chaos and crime. She even approved bills without being present, using Biden's auto pen, signing off reckless policies that hurt every working American. Gasps filled the studio. Vance's eyes turned back to Chelsea. And now, instead of breaking free from that legacy, you've embraced it. You've joined in the same corruption, the same fraud. Chelsea, you are walking the same dark path your parents paved. The audience sat in stunned silence. Some wiped tears. Others whispered prayers under their breath. Chelsea's composure shattered, her eyes welled with tears. But JD Vance's voice remained steady, unwavering. And with every word, the scandal cut deeper into the heart of Washington. The host hesitated, but producers in the control room made a bold choice. Suddenly, the big screen behind Chelsea flickered to life. Documents filled the screen. Official bank transfers, grant approval letters, receipts. At the bottom of one page was Chelsea Clinton's signature. The audience gasped in unison. JD Vance didn't even turn around. He knew what was on the screen. For everyone watching at home, this isn't rumor. These are government records. $82 million transferred from USAID. We can trace where every dollar went. Chelsea's lips trembled. She glanced at the screen, then back at the host. These are doctored. This is fake. It has to be. But her voice cracked under the weight of the evidence. The audience wasn't buying it. Mothers in the crowd shook their heads. Veterans folded their arms in disgust. On social media, the images spread like wildfire. Millions watched with their own eyes as the evidence scrolled live. Vance finally glanced at the screen and spoke slowly. The truth is no longer hidden. The American people deserve better than lies dressed as charity. Chelsea tried to steady her breathing. Her hands clutched the edge of her chair. "You don't understand," she said, her voice softening. "My family has been under attack for years. Everything we did was to make America better." JD Vance leaned forward, his eyes piercing. "If this was about making America better, you would have built homes for veterans. You would have funded hospitals in forgotten towns. Instead, you built palaces for yourself." The audience broke into murmurs again. Some gasped at the bluntness. Others whispered, "He's right." Chelsea blinked rapidly, her eyes glossing with tears. For a moment, her polished confidence collapsed, and what remained was a woman cornered by her own choices. The host, sensing history in the making, stayed quiet. He didn't dare interrupt. Vance's voice lowered, almost like a father speaking to a child. "Chelsea, this is not just about politics. It's about the soul of a nation. If you follow the same path as your parents, you will lead America into ruin. But you can still choose differently." The studio was dead silent. America held its breath. JD Vance straightened his posture. His next words would echo across Washington. He locked eyes with Chelsea. "You cannot heal the poor with stolen money. You cannot preach compassion while living off fraud. Chelsea, America does not need another Clinton pretending to care. America needs truth." The crowd gasped. Some stood to their feet, clapping in shock, others covering their mouths in disbelief. Chelsea's tears spilled over. She shook her head, whispering, "No, no." But the damage was done. The host finally spoke, his voice trembling. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are witnessing a moment unlike anything we've seen before." Social media erupted. Millions of comments poured in, some furious, some relieved, but all stunned. Clips of JD Vance's words spread instantly. America does not need another Clinton pretending to care. It was the sentence that broke through decades of political cover. For the first time, Chelsea Clinton sat speechless on live television, and JD Vance had just flipped the entire narrative of Washington in a single breath. Chelsea's silence had lasted too long. Her eyes were red, her cheeks wet, but suddenly she straightened up, forcing her voice back into strength. "This is nothing but political theater," she shouted, slamming her palm on the table. "Donald Trump and JD Vance are using lies to smear me. My parents fought for America, and I've dedicated my life to helping people. This so-called evidence is a weapon against my family because we refuse to bow to their agenda." The audience stirred, some clapping in sympathy, others booing in disbelief. But JD Vance didn't flinch. He leaned into his microphone, calm as ever. "Chelsea, no one forced you to spend taxpayer money on yourself. You claim to help the poor, yet children in Appalachia still go hungry while you throw million-dollar weddings." Chelsea bit her lip, her voice shaking now. "You're twisting everything." Vance didn't raise his tone. He simply said, "No, America is seeing the truth in real time. And for once, the truth doesn't bow to privilege." The studio was thunderstruck. It was no longer a debate. It was exposure. JD Vance turned his gaze directly to the camera, speaking not to Chelsea now, but to the American people. For years, the Clinton Global Initiative has been presented as a lifeline to the poor. But behind the curtain, it became a personal bank account for the Clinton family. The screen behind him lit up again, this time showing charts of donations and government grants vanishing into private accounts. Billions promised to rebuild communities overseas, Vance explained. Yet when inspectors arrived, nothing had been built. Promises of schools, hospitals, jobs, all vanished into thin air. And now, $82 million in U.S. taxpayer funds, meant to help struggling nations, redirected into luxury estates and personal events. The audience gasped louder. Mothers clutched their children's hands. Veterans shook their heads in anger. Chelsea's breathing grew shallow. She whispered, "You don't understand. We tried." But Vance cut in firmly. "What you tried was to fool the American people, and that is over." The studio erupted into cheers and shouts. Even critics at home could not ignore the depth of what was unfolding live. Phones buzzed across the country. Families at dinner tables turned their TVs up. Truck drivers pulled over to watch the live stream on their phones. The entire nation was tuned in. News tickers on rival networks lit up. JD Vance exposes Clinton Foundation on live TV. Chelsea cornered an $82 million scandal. Chelsea's eyes darted toward the audience, scanning the faces staring back at her. Some pitied her, but most looked betrayed. JD Vance finally lowered his voice, speaking with gravity. "America, you've been robbed for too long. While hardworking men and women pay their taxes, elites have stolen behind closed doors. This is not just a scandal. It's a crime against every honest citizen." Tears streamed down the cheeks of people in the studio. One woman stood and shouted, "Enough is enough!" Chelsea pressed her face into her hands, trembling, and JD Vance, calm and unshaken, ended with words that hung in the air. "Justice is coming, whether the powerful like it or not." The studio exploded into applause. Chelsea wiped her tears quickly and tried to rebuild her composure. She forced herself to sit taller, her voice growing sharper as she looked directly at the Vice President. "You think you can humiliate me on television," she snapped, her words trembling with anger. "But you forget something, Mr. Vance. My family has survived worse. My parents have been attacked for decades and they're still standing. This will not destroy us." The audience murmured uneasily. Some clapped in support, others hissed in disapproval. JD Vance simply folded his hands on the table, calm, unmoved. Chelsea leaned forward, desperate. "You call us corrupt, but where would America be without the Clintons? My father led the nation through prosperity. My mother fought for justice, and I have continued their work." The crowd shifted restlessly. Many shook their heads. Vance did not raise his voice. "Chelsea, history doesn't forget prosperity built on lies. Tonight, the truth is stronger than your words." Chelsea swallowed hard. The audience waited, knowing the Vice President had more to say, and feared it would be devastating. JD Vance's voice dropped lower, steady but sharp, like a blade, cutting through silence. "You talk about your mother fighting for justice," he said, looking directly at Chelsea. "But the record tells a darker story." The screen flashed again. Headlines, reports, memos. Hillary Clinton approving policies that left the borders wide open. Documents showing bills signed by Biden's auto pen. Her name tied to reckless decisions that let chaos spill into American communities. Gasps rippled across the audience. One man shouted, "My town was ruined because of that border." Another woman shook her head, whispering, "We lived it." Vance continued, "Chelsea, your mother was not a champion of justice. She was one of the architects of the crisis we face today. She allowed crime to spread. She abandoned hardworking citizens to favor illegal deals and backroom promises. And instead of standing against her, you chose to follow her path." Chelsea's lips trembled, her face pale. For a moment, she seemed smaller, like the weight of her family's legacy was crushing her in front of the world. The audience sat frozen, knowing JD Vance wasn't finished. The Vice President took a deep breath before his next words. He did not speak with malice, only with truth. "Your father, Bill Clinton, held the highest office in this land for 8 years. And what did America inherit? Scandals, broken promises, and a trail of failures. The audience stirred uncomfortably. Even critics of Trump's administration knew the words carried weight. From 1993 to 2001, not one meaningful achievement stood the test of time. Instead, the nation was left with weakness, corruption, and division. That is his legacy. That is the shadow you were born into, Chelsea. Chelsea's eyes filled again with tears. She shook her head weakly, whispering, "Stop. Please stop." But JD Vance's voice never wavered. America cannot afford to repeat the mistakes of the past. You had a chance to step away from that shadow. Instead, you embraced it, and in doing so, you betrayed the very people you claimed to serve. The studio erupted into gasps and whispers. Some clutched their hearts. Others sat in stunned silence. Chelsea's defenses were crumbling, and the world was watching every second of it. The studio lights dimmed slightly as the producers brought up more files on the massive screen. This time, the documents weren't just about the $82 million. They showed a pattern, a trail stretching back years. JD Vance turned to the audience. This scandal didn't start yesterday. The Clinton Global Initiative has been used as a funnel for government funds, private donations, and international deals that never reached the people they were promised to. The screen flashed pictures of empty construction sites in Africa, South America, and even in rural America. Projects that were supposed to be built with Clinton Foundation money never existed. Billions pledged, Vance continued, his voice steady. Yet not one brick laid, not one community transformed. The same families who donated in good faith now know the truth. It was all smoke and mirrors. The audience gasped. A veteran in the front row stood up and shouted, "That money could have saved lives." Chelsea pressed her trembling hands together, whispering to herself. But her words couldn't be heard over the sound of outrage echoing through the studio. Vance's expression grew heavier as he shifted from numbers to faces. "I met with families in Appalachia last year," he said, his voice low but piercing. "They were told they'd receive aid through Clinton programs. Instead, they're still living in broken homes, still struggling for clean water. They were forgotten while the money was spent on luxury and power." The screen showed a family of 4, living in a rundown house with a leaking roof. Tears streamed down the mother's face as she described the promises made to them by charity groups linked to the Clintons. The audience went silent, the weight of the images pressing on everyone's hearts. Chelsea shook her head violently. "No, this isn't fair. We tried. You don't know how hard it is to run a foundation." Vance looked straight at her. "Chelsea, hard work is digging wells, building schools, helping veterans, not throwing million-dollar weddings. America sees the difference now." The audience broke into applause. Others sat with tears in their eyes. It was no longer just about corruption. It was about betrayal. The pressure was unbearable. Chelsea's face was pale, her breathing uneven. She tried to speak, but her words stumbled out in fragments. You don't understand. It's bigger than me." Her hands shook as she clutched her chair. The host leaned forward, his voice cautious. "Chelsea, do you want to take a break?" But JD Vance's calm voice cut through the tension. "No. The American people don't get to take a break from the suffering caused by corruption. Tonight, the truth stays on this table." The crowd erupted in cheers, louder than before. Chelsea looked out into the sea of faces that once adored the Clinton name, now staring with anger, sadness, and betrayal. Tears spilled from her eyes and she whispered, "Please, stop." But the vice president wasn't finished. His words were slow, deliberate, and devastating. "Chelsea, the time to stop was before the money was stolen. Now, The time is for accountability. The studio thundered with applause as the nation watched one of the most shocking political confrontations unfold in real time. The producers switched the screen again, this time showing maps with glowing red dots across the globe: Haiti, Nigeria, South Sudan, and more. Each dot represented millions in aid that had been promised through the Clinton Global Initiative, but never reached its destination. JD Vance's tone grew heavier. This isn't just about America's money being stolen. It's about the poorest people in the world being robbed of their hope. Villages promised schools got nothing but empty words. Families promised medicine buried their children instead. The audience gasped. Some wiped their eyes as the screen showed photos of abandoned lots where schools were supposed to stand. Chelsea's face twisted in panic. "Those aren't my fault. We partnered with other groups. Things went wrong on the ground." Vance didn't flinch. "No, Chelsea. Things went wrong in your boardrooms. Things went wrong when money meant for the weak was signed off into luxury accounts." The crowd erupted. Some shouted in anger, others simply sat in stunned silence. JD Vance turned directly to the camera again, his voice firm and steady. "To every American watching this tonight, understand, the $82 million from USAID was not the first betrayal. It was just the one that finally got caught." He paused, letting the words sink in. For decades, the Clinton Foundation built an empire of promises overseas. They told struggling nations they would rebuild after disasters, but the money disappeared. They told desperate families they would receive aid, but nothing ever came. This wasn't charity. This was exploitation. The audience murmured loudly. Mothers clutched their children closer. Veterans lowered their heads in disgust. Chelsea, her voice cracking, pleaded, "You're twisting everything. My family has done good, so much good." Vance's reply was calm but devastating. "Chelsea, good cannot be measured in ribbon-cutting ceremonies and photo shoots. Good is measured in lives saved, homes built, and children fed. And in every measurable way, your foundation failed." The studio sat in absolute silence, the weight of betrayal filling the air. The tension reached its peak. Chelsea buried her face in her hands, sobbing openly. Her voice cracked through her tears. "Why are you doing this to me? Why are you tearing me apart in front of everyone?" Vance did not gloat. He did not raise his voice. He spoke with the calm of a man carrying a duty. "I'm not doing this to you, Chelsea," he said softly. "I'm doing this for the people who trusted you, for the veterans who needed housing, for the single mothers who needed support, for the children overseas who were promised schools and were left with dust." The crowd broke into loud applause, some rising to their feet. Others were in tears, unable to believe what they were witnessing. Chelsea lifted her head slowly, her face streaked with tears. The world could see her defenses had crumbled, but the Vice President's eyes stayed locked on hers, unshaken. And then he delivered the line that echoed across America. "Chelsea, this was never about you being attacked. It was about America finally standing up to say, 'Enough.'" The studio roared, and the nation watched history being made. Outside the studio, the nation was boiling. Crowds had gathered in front of big screens in New York, Dallas, Chicago, and Miami, watching the confrontation live. Chants rose in the streets. "No more fraud. No more lies." Inside, JD Vance leaned forward. "This isn't just about Chelsea Clinton. This is about the Washington machine that protected her family for decades. A system that rewarded failure, that looked away when taxpayer money vanished." The host blinked nervously. He had never seen such direct words spoken on live television. Vance pointed at the camera. For years, agencies signed off on checks to the Clinton Global Initiative, knowing there would be no accountability. Why? Because the Clintons had power. Because Washington feared them. The audience erupted with gasps. Some clapped, others shouted angrily. Chelsea's voice cracked. "You're making it sound like I run Washington." Vance turned toward her, calm but sharp. "Chelsea, you don't run Washington, but your family fed off it, and America is done paying the bill." The crowd exploded in applause. Washington's halls were shaking. The producers pulled up another set of files. Contracts, signed agreements, secret memos. The Clinton Foundation had taken money not just from USAID, but also through partnerships with international corporations and foreign governments. JD Vance pointed to the documents. "Here it is, plain as day. While small businesses in America drowned in debt, your foundation pocketed millions through backroom deals, partnerships with companies under federal investigation, donations from foreign powers who expected favors in return." The audience stirred, their whispers growing louder. Chelsea slammed her fist on the table. "You can't prove those were bribes. Every foundation accepts donations," Vance replied evenly. "There's a difference between charity and corruption. Charity doesn't demand payback in policy. Charity doesn't sell America piece by piece to the highest bidder." The host froze. He knew the words were explosive, but he also knew they were true. On social media, hashtags spread like wildfire. Washington exposed, and no more Clintons. America wasn't just watching a scandal. They were watching the curtain fall on decades of deals. Chelsea's face was flushed, her voice cracking as she tried to push back. "You're destroying me. You're destroying my family's legacy." The audience roared in response, some shouting, "Your family destroyed themselves." JD Vance turned his gaze back to her. His words were slow, piercing. "Chelsea, America isn't watching your family's legacy crumble. They're finally seeing it for what it always was. False promises, hidden corruption, and betrayal of trust." The studio was dead silent, except for Chelsea's soft sobs. Vance turned back to the camera. "This moment is bigger than one name. It's bigger than one scandal. It's about whether we, as a nation, will keep letting elites live by different rules than everyone else." The crowd rose to their feet in thunderous applause, some weeping as they clapped. Chelsea stared at the table, broken, unable to speak. Her last defense had been stripped away. And America, watching from coast to coast, knew Washington would never be the same again. The studio air felt heavy, like the oxygen had been drained from the room. Even the cameras zoomed tighter on Chelsea's trembling face, capturing every tear, every twitch of fear. JD Vance's voice was calm but forceful. "Chelsea, your family built an empire not of service, but of exploitation. You wore the mask of public service, but behind it was greed and betrayal. Tonight, America is finally tearing that mask off." The audience thundered with applause, some shouting, "Tell the truth!" Chelsea tried to form words, but nothing came out. Her lips quivered, her shoulders shook. Vance continued, his gaze unblinking. For decades, Washington elites told Americans they were too small to matter, that the rich and powerful knew better. But this scandal proves otherwise. Every stolen dollar, every broken promise has faces, names, lives attached to it. And those lives deserve justice. Tears welled in the eyes of audience members. The moment felt less like a debate and more like a reckoning. Chelsea finally snapped. Slamming her fists on the table, she shouted, "You don't know what it's like. You don't know the pressure of carrying this family's name." The crowd booed. Some shouted back, "We carry the pressure of feeding our kids." JD Vance did not raise his voice. He waited for silence, then spoke like a man delivering a verdict. "Chelsea, you want America's sympathy, but sympathy belongs to those who suffered while you lived in mansions. Sympathy belongs to the veterans still homeless, the families still hungry, the children still waiting for schools that never came." The screen behind him lit up with images, veterans sleeping under bridges, children in torn clothes, mothers crying outside shuttered clinics. The audience sobbed openly now. A woman in the front row clasped her hands, whispering a prayer. Chelsea covered her face, trembling, as the nation saw the weight of her family's choices laid bare. JD Vance turned slowly toward Chelsea, his expression firm but not cruel. He spoke each word with precision, knowing they would echo across history. Chelsea, America never needed your family's empire. It needed honesty. It needed leaders who would bleed for the people, not bleed them dry. The audience gasped, some rising to their feet. The host sat frozen, unable to even move his notes. Chelsea's tears flowed uncontrollably now. Her hands trembled as she whispered, "Stop, please." But Vance's final words in that moment pierced through the noise of the entire studio. You call it pressure to carry your name, but the real pressure has always been carried by the forgotten Americans who never had your wealth, your privilege, or your chances. And still, they lived with more dignity than the Clinton legacy ever gave them. The studio erupted in applause and tears. Across the nation, millions of viewers sat stunned, many crying at the raw truth they had just heard. It was the blow that left Chelsea shattered and Washington reeling. The silence in the studio was suffocating. Every face, from the audience to the cameraman, was locked on Chelsea, who sat trembling, her makeup streaked by tears. She looked less like the daughter of a political dynasty and more like a figure crushed beneath the weight of truth. JD Vance turned his chair slightly toward the crowd. His voice softened. This scandal is not just about corruption. It's about what happens when leaders put themselves above the people, when promises become excuses and power becomes a weapon. On the big screen behind him, images rolled. Shuttered factories, struggling farmers, children studying under broken roofs. Each picture told a story of neglect, of what $82 million could have saved but didn't. The audience broke down in tears. Some clasped their hands in prayer. Others shouted, "Justice!" Chelsea buried her face in her palms. She whispered something no microphone picked up, only broken fragments of regret. But JD Vance remained firm, his eyes steady. The time for excuses is over. The American people will never again be silenced. Chelsea tried one last time to defend herself. Her voice was barely audible. "You don't understand. I never wanted this." The Vice President leaned in, his tone sharp but not cruel. "Chelsea, you may not have wanted this moment, but the American people never wanted betrayal. They never wanted their money stolen, their trust abused, their future sold." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. Then he delivered the sentence that shattered every last defense. "You lived off the suffering of the forgotten, and tonight, the forgotten have finally spoken back." The audience erupted. Tears streamed. Applause shook the walls. Chants of "enough is enough" echoed through the studio. Chelsea sat frozen, broken beyond repair. The weight of her family's empire had come crashing down, live on national television. For the first time in decades, the Clinton name was not untouchable. It was exposed, stripped bare. JD Vance rose from his seat, the crowd standing with him. The Vice President had turned a scandal into a reckoning. The broadcast ended, but America was forever different. In living rooms, diners, and workplaces across the country, people sat in shock, many weeping openly. They felt justice for once. They felt seen. News anchors scrambled, commentators argued, but one truth remained. JD Vance had spoken words no one else dared to. He had flipped the narrative, and in doing so, restored hope to millions who thought their voices no longer mattered. Chelsea Clinton left the studio in silence, escorted by aides, her head bowed. But the story was no longer hers. It belonged to the people who had just witnessed history. JD Vance closed the night with a line that echoed across the nation. "America belongs to her people, not her elites. And starting tonight, we reclaim her." The audience roared. Families watching at home cried, clapping through their tears. My friends, you've just watched a story that shook Washington and moved the hearts of millions. If this moment touched you, if it made you cry, if it gave you hope, then don't stay silent. Smash that like button, subscribe right now, and comment below what part broke your heart the most. Your voice matters here. And for those who want to go further, join our membership to unlock powerful stories and behind-the-scenes features you'll never forget. Together, we'll keep exposing the truth, and we'll keep America's hope alive.